Chapter 5. If we only feel what we're thinking, don't we need to think positively to feel that way? We are only one thought away from peace, love, and joy, which come from a state of no thought. There is a caveat that I haven't mentioned yet to the principle that we can only feel what we're thinking. The more accurate way of describing it is that we can only ever feel negative emotions when we are thinking. The goal isn't necessarily to completely stop feeling negative emotions. Some of the negative emotions can be helpful, such as feeling fearful when deciding to walk down a dark alley alone with no one else in sight. These negative emotions are only helpful to us in terms of survival. But if we don't constantly encounter life or death situations, negative emotions are more unhelpful than helpful for most of us. We're going to be moving forward with the context that we're not struggling for survival physically. So we'll be using the context that negative emotions are not necessary most of the time. When I mention that we can only ever feel what we're thinking, most people assume that we must think positive to feel positive emotions. Instead of convincing you if this is true or not, let's do another thought experiment so that you can experience the truth for yourself. Recall a time when you felt the most joy and love you've ever felt in your life, and feel the feelings that you felt at that time as much as you can for at least 30 seconds. What kind of thoughts were going through your mind at that peak moment when you felt the most joy and love? I'm not going to ask you what you were doing at the time, but what thoughts were going through your head at that exact moment? For many people that answer this, they realize that they didn't have any thoughts during that exact moment. For others, they say that the thought was that they were so grateful or happy. For those that answered that they had the thought that they were grateful, did you feel that joy and love before you had the thought or after? Take 15 seconds to answer that question before moving on. What insights and epiphanies did you have? What's crazy is that most people didn't have any thoughts going through their head when they felt the happiest and the most amount of love in their lives. For those who had the thought that they were grateful, they felt that way before having that thought. If they had that thought, it happened after they felt the feelings. So the thought could not have produced the feeling. This brings us to another truth. You do not have to have thoughts or think to feel positive emotions. The beautiful part about truth is that it needs no justification because it can be experienced right here for right now. It doesn't need to be proven or rationalized to you, and you experience this truth firsthand by the experiment we just did. Here's why we don't need to have thoughts or think to feel positive emotions like joy and love. Our natural state of being is joy, love, ecstasy, freedom, and gratitude. This may be hard to believe because if it's natural, why don't we feel that way all the time? I'll answer this in a bit. If we want to see the natural side of anything, one of the best ways is to look at nature and the state of it in its infancy, before it is affected and conditioned by its environment. For example, let's look at the natural state of a baby. What is a baby's natural and default state, assuming the baby wasn't abused, neglected, or had any physical issues? Are babies naturally stressed, anxious, fearful, and self-conscious? Or are they naturally in a state of bliss, happiness, and love? Our natural state of being is joy, love, and peace. Therefore, any thinking that we do will only take us away from these natural states of being, which is why whenever we feel extremely stressed, we are having a lot of thinking going on. The strength of the negative emotion we feel is in direct proportion to how much thinking we are doing in the moment. On the other hand, the intensity of the positive emotion we feel is inversely proportional to the amount of thinking we are doing in the moment. In other words, the less thinking we have going on, the stronger the positive emotion we feel in the present. To see the truth in this, recall a few other memories you had when you were extremely stressed and anxious, and see how much thinking you were doing at the time. Take about 1 to 2 minutes to do this. Then recall a few memories where you were at your happiest and felt the most joy and love, and see how much thinking you had going on at that time. Take another 1 to 2 minutes to do this before moving on to really experience and internalize the truth of what you see. An analogy that my coach taught me that helped crystallize this concept was to imagine our minds as a speedometer, like a car. But instead of miles per hour, it's thoughts per minute. The more thinking we have going on, the higher the thought-o-meter goes. And if we have enough thinking going on, It'll go into the red zone. This is when we feel extremely stressed, burned out, frustrated, and angry. It is not the content of our thinking that causes us stress, but that we are thinking, period. The amount of thinking we have going on is directly correlated with the magnitude of stress and negative emotions we are experiencing at any given moment. When you're experiencing a lot of frustration, stress, anxiety, or any negative emotion, just know that it is because you're thinking. And the intensity of those emotions is directly correlated to how much thinking is going on. Therefore, it's not what we're thinking about that is causing us suffering, but that we are thinking. To summarize, we do not have to try to think positive to experience love, joy, bliss, and any positive emotions we want, because it is our natural state to feel those emotions. The only times we don't naturally feel these emotions is when we begin to think about the thoughts we're having, thus blocking the direct connection to infinite intelligence, and we feel stressed, anxious, depressed, and fearful. It is not about the contents of our thinking, but that we're thinking, which is the root cause of our suffering. The intensity of the negative emotions is directly correlated to the amount of thinking we have going on in the present. The less thinking we have, the more space we create for positive emotions to naturally surface. If you make the connection, you can crack the code. You've been trying to think positively for a long time. You've been trying to think constructively for a long time. And what's crazy is at some point, it was a thought inside of yourself that caused you to think about your thoughts and determine whether you needed to improve the quality of your thoughts or you needed to sustain the level of thinking that you have developed up to this point. But why is that not a strange conversation? And who were you talking to? Why is it not strange that we've all had a conversation with no one about the things that we think and do? Like, why are we constantly justifying our thoughts? Why are we constantly justifying our actions? Not even to other people, to ourselves. Why do we hang up the phone after getting in an argument and then pick up the phone and call somebody else to pass on the story, not even for straight gossip, but for the confirmation of hearing somebody else say after listening to our form of what took place that we were right? And it's not even that we like to hear people say that we were right. We get caught in conversations about the things that we think with ourselves, and we need confirmation to get pulled out of that. So we lean on the people that we trust. We lean on the voices that we have grown attached to and identified ourselves by. And we use them to pull us out of a wheel that we put ourselves on continually. And that's why some people get tired of you, because some of your friends are constantly pulling you off a wheel that you're jumping back on the moment that they pull you off of it. You're one of them high maintenance people, one of them high maintenance friends. Thinking you knew caused you to do. When you started doing, you forgot who you were, so you weren't being. As you were moving through the dark, doing the things that you had planned to do, your understanding, your brain, operating as a non-stop survival mechanism, trying to ensure the safety of you based on your perception, was the most valuable tool that you could have had. But inside of truth, inside of the reality of what this experience is in the physical and where it derives from in the spirit realm, your brain used as a survival mechanism is the very thing causing you to miss out on all the things that you set out to experience. The peace that was promised to you is still absent from your expression because you've been thinking about what it's going to look like. You've been thinking about the aspects of your life that you have to include and exclude in order to reach that place. The joy that has been promised to you as an inheritance from your original creator and design has still been absent in your expression because you've been thinking about all the things that would make you happy that you don't have yet, and thinking about all the things that are still off kilter that you are affected by and can't reach joy until those things are corrected. You won't reach joy until you stop thinking. You won't reach peace till you stop thinking. You won't be able to find that peace that passes all understanding until you stop trying to understand it. You want love so bad, but you're always thinking about love, thinking about being liked, thinking about being accepted, thinking about the possibility of being rejected, thinking about being unsafe, thinking about being protected, thinking about what you want for your life. And when love comes and is directly in front of you, expressing nothing but itself towards you, you totally miss it because you perceive the encounter as something that you should be judging to see if it fits the criteria for what you want, or it's something that needs to be dismissed. But even after we come into an awareness of the destructive, intrusive nature of thinking, we are so in the practice of the action of thinking and thinking that our thinking has benefits, that it's not something that we could just throw away or disconnect from in an instant. You do this unconsciously. The moment something happens, it triggers a response inside of you that is natural to the state that you live in your life. This chapter is very significant and sets this book apart from many of the self-help books and other self-healing concepts that are on the shelf, because it is actually in direct alignment with the universal truth that your thoughts only lead you in circles, that you will only take trips around the same mountain as you try to progress forward if you are still living through your thoughts and your thinking and your understanding, your definitions, your interpretations, being identified with your miscreations. And then the most ironic part about it is, after we think our way into these prisons that originate from our thinking, we begin to think our way out. But is it not because we're constantly being fed the information that if we could but alter our thinking, we could alter our entire lives? And you've got a YouTube full of people who are teaching people how to dive deeper into the inner conversations that are taking place with themselves and try to consciously change the narratives on the inside. But the narratives on the inside are driven by my interpretations that derive from my past experiences. So trying to engage consciously in this subconscious experience that takes place inside of me the instant that something pops up into my experience puts me in an uneasy, unsettled, anxious place where I'm never able to rest or be at peace because I'm constantly gauging every moment in front of me to see what I should be thinking, and judging and grading what I am thinking by thinking about what I thought when it first took place. So I'm in this constant state of thinking where it is very, very tough to escape negative emotions because it is by definition the darkness. There is no way to perceive the future events that will take place, which we are constantly thinking about. So we reach into the reserves of our past experiences, which is where our fears are even birthed from in the first place. And we end up living in a world full of monsters, being chased and tormented by nothing but illusionary pictures and shadows and forms that we've become so attached to because we are constantly trying to escape the fear of reality that we know we don't control. This is spiritual suicide, for you to know that you have been given dominion, control, and all power and authority in your life, that you are the author of your experience and your expression is fully left into your hands based on what you expect and what you hold as dear on the inside of you, to run and retreat to the field of fantasy where I have to do nothing but think about the dysfunction that I display now and the things that I'll do to fix it later, is spiritual suicide, because in an instant you can change your life. In an instant you can change how you feel. To live trapped under depression, trapped under negative emotion is completely unnecessary, because you can crack the code today as what the issue is. It's not that person. It's not that thing. It's not needing a replacement to be tender and hold you dear. It's not needing everybody around you to behave appropriately. It's time that your eye becomes single. It's time that you become whole for the first time in your life. It's time that you give up the division that derives from the allegiance with the legion of voices of the ego. But to be real, this is really the only way to end judgment. This is the only way to end condemnation. This is the only way to be a constant, endless expression of the love that we embody and carry on the inside. Even since you've dropped the act and you've become more intentional about the things that you think, and you've developed a taste for truth and you want to move in accordance with truth and live by design, your life has still been an endless judgment game. You now walk around and critique how everybody else is falling short. And not only that, you also carry the burden of having a non-stop reel of every time you miss the mark. So you're thinking about what you're thinking about, you're thinking about what they're thinking about, and you're thinking about how those thoughts align with the truth that you're learning. And while you're learning truth, you're thinking about that. So you're funneling everything through your thinking, which with all of these thoughts comes a host of associated feelings. And now there's this pressure. There's this pressure that I feel like I can't shake. And the more I think about it, even when I'm thinking about possible solutions, the more the pressure increases. The only way to decompress the bomb of emotions and thoughts that we've become is to realize that it is not what we are thinking that is causing us to become a bomb waiting to blow. It is thinking itself that creates the bomb. And you say, well, what am I going to do if I stop thinking? What would my day look like if I stop thinking? That's a perfect indication to let you and me both know that we have the fear of what we would do with ourselves if we weren't thinking, that we think way too much. Take a moment, right? Consider who we've thought to be great thinkers. Nikola Tesla, Einstein, Dick Gregory. While they were highly intelligent and contained almost what appeared to be endless knowledge, they also were very conflicted. They were very sad beings. Ignorance is only bliss because joy, peace, and love are natural to your nature. But it's very easy to see in our society that we do not know that, because millions of dollars are spent every year by people trying to find solutions to their inner sadness, trying to find a process that they can connect to, a denomination that they can celebrate with, a community, a marriage, a friendship, anything. We'll take anything that guides us closer to the truth of ourselves that feels good, because living with the negative emotions that we've carried up until this point has not been enjoyable, and we don't want to extend that further. But unless we learn where these negative emotions come from and we align our lives with these facts, we're doomed to recreate our destruction, because we operate from a destructive mechanism. We perish for a lack of knowledge. Universal principle for sure. We suffer from our thinking, and the people around us suffer from our suffering. We perish for a lack of knowledge, because had we known that all we had to do was divorce our thinking to operate in accordance with our original design, I think we'd see it at a higher rate. But instead, we see a world full of people lost in confusion because we're taught how to play in our thoughts. Lock in.